It's one thing to lose games because of your weaknesses, but when your strengths aren't consistent enough and let you down on multiple occasions, that's when the frustration really starts to pile up. For the Sacramento Kings, it's their offense that lets them down again. A very winnable game in Memphis turns into yet another loss following a promising win. This Kings team just can't seem to string wins together, and we'll talk about it right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And as you may be able to hear or potentially see, hopefully I don't look too bad, I'm sick again, battling another illness here. It's been a busy week at ABC 10, I'll just say that. Unfortunately, the Sacramento Kings aren't always the best medicine, and watching tonight's game certainly didn't make me feel any better. There were points, there are bits and pieces of this 115-110 loss to the Memphis Grizzlies where I was really feeling good. Like, even with the cold, I was like, you know what? Kings are playing well. They're doing this well, especially on the defensive end. I thought, wow, the Kings look really, really sharp. They should win this game. At the very least, I'll put up with the sniffles. I'll put up with the coughing for a Sacramento Kings victory. Well, lo and behold, I'm putting up with this crap all for nothing because the offense of the Sacramento Kings let them down again. Like, it's one thing for the Kings to lose games consistently because defensively they really, really struggle. And of course, we know 3-point defense for the Sacramento Kings has been a real issue, and they've lost a vast majority of their games this season because of that. That wasn't an issue tonight. We'll get to the defense later on. But a couple episodes ago, I talked about the Sacramento Kings lacking an identity. They've lost their identity. They don't know what their identity is. And what their identity is supposed to be based off of this roster and the perceived strengths of this roster is a versatile, high-paced, potentially devastating offense that has the capability to beat you on all three levels, that is dynamic in the clutch, and that it can explode at any given time. That is what the identity of this Kings team is supposed to be. And it has been that at times, but the problem is consistency. This offense isn't consistent enough to be considered a strength. And if the offense for this Kings team isn't a strength, then the Sacramento Kings are not a good basketball team. In fact, the Sacramento Kings are a bad basketball team. And that's what makes this season so frustrating and this 10-13 start so frustrating and so perplexing, because you look at this roster and you look at their history and you look at the numbers and the way they're competing at times during games and you go, this team is not bad. This team is loaded with talent. They've got individual players that are capable of doing good things on both ends of the floor. They've had a guy in De'Aaron Fox go for 60 points, followed by 49 points, right? They have Domantas Sabonis, who is a double-double and sometimes triple-double machine, right? They're finally starting Malik Monk. There's so many things about this team where it's like, this team is good. But whether it be the strength of the Western Conference or just Sacramento's inability to stop tripping on their own freaking feet, this team cannot come close to living up to expectations of not just myself, not just you, not just the fan base and the organization, but from themselves, the players, the coaches. Expectations are way higher than what they're being able to deliver because this Kings team doesn't know who they're going to be on a nightly basis. The inconsistency offensively is so frustrating. And what's weird about this game is that the 3-point shot was never really falling that well at any point. There was a stretch in like the late first quarter, especially in the second quarter, early second quarter, when the Kings created some space and built a 12-point lead. There was a stretch where the shot was falling pretty well, right? The ball movement was good, and the shot was falling. But it wasn't like the first half the Kings were shooting lights out, and then the second half they fell off the face of the earth. Offensively, the Kings were their typical struggling from 3-point shooting range throughout the night, and then it got really bad in the second half. But what happened in the second half is the Kings went away from what was working in the first half. The Kings, I thought, off-ball movement was some of the best they've had all season. I thought the cutting was dynamic. It was sharp. The ball was finding cutters. They were finishing at the rim. They were touching the paint almost every single possession, right? The way the Kings were moving the basketball on offense, even with the 3-point shot not falling, allowed them to still have 2 30-plus point quarters, allowed them to build a double-digit lead, allowed them to look good. Second half, it just became ISOs and chucking threes, right? In the second half, for the game, the Kings were 8 of 35 from 3-point range. In the second half, the Kings were 2 of 18 from 3-point range. So how, in the second half, when you're shooting worse than the first half, are you taking more threes than you did in the first half? And then you go to the fourth quarter, too. You go to clutch time, and the Sacramento Kings had something really dynamic going on early in this game between Malik Monk and Domantas Sabonis in the pick and roll, and you go away from that, and I understand DeMar DeRozan is a really good ISO scorer, but you try and hammer that nail home time and time and time and time again, and if DeMar's not hitting shots, you got nothing there. This was crunch time or clutch time, and clutch time in the NBA is final 5 minutes when the game is within 5 points. Here are the Kings' offensive possessions during clutch time tonight. Fox miss, DeRozan miss, Monk make, Keegan miss, Fox miss, Monk 3, Monk miss, Fox make, DeRozan turnover, Monk miss. Those were the Kings' offensive possessions in clutch time tonight. Again, clutch time, supposed to be a primary strength of this Kings team, an identity of this Kings team. How much did you hear on this Locked On Kings podcast? How much have we talked about? How much does it make sense that the Kings, having one of the best clutch players in the NBA, and by the way, De'Aaron Fox is number 1 in clutch points so far this season, so we know he's still a very good clutch player. You add DeMar DeRozan into that, who's also one of the best clutch players in the league. You have 2 of the most clutch players on this team, and yet, while statistically Sacramento is still in the upper echelon towards the top of the league in clutch offense, the eye test will tell you tonight and in past games that the shot making hasn't been there. It's not been consistent or reliable enough for the Sacramento Kings to feel good about. The Kings have lost more close games than they've won this season. Again, we were talking about coming into this year, if the Kings could keep it close through 3.5 quarters, if they keep it close and get to those final 5 minutes, that's where the Kings can take over. That's where the Kings are in their element. That's not been the case this year. A piece of the Kings' identity is not what we thought it was. So their ISO 3-point chucking, clutch scoring was bad in the second half. And then you have 3 of your top 3-point shooters, and De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, and Kevin Huerter combining 1 of 20 from 3-point range tonight. And again, this is like where you start talking about, we'll talk about this later on, this Kings team's inability to string performances together because all those guys shot relatively well from 3-point range in the win against Houston. So if you can't get consistent 3-point shooting from multiple guys on a nightly basis, it's not just like one player is a streaky shooter. It's not just Fox is a streaky 3-point shooter or Keegan's a streaky 3-point shooter. You have Fox, Huerter, and Keegan Murray, who both have games where I think Fox had 4, Keegan and Huerter both had 3. You have 10 3-pointers between the 3 of them. The game before and the very next night, they're 1 of 20 between the 3 of them. How can you hope to have any kind of consistent offense when some of your best shooters are that inconsistent? And in addition to the fourth quarter offense and second half offense in general not being good, the offense let you down in 2 other different places. One, you built that 12-point lead with a really good start to the second quarter. And like we've talked about it multiple times this season, Sacramento's inability to close quarters has really hurt them. Memphis goes on like a 16-4 run over the final few minutes of the third or the second quarter, and suddenly that 12-point Kings lead is like a 1-point deficit at halftime. And what did the Kings do so well the other night against Houston? They closed out the second quarter on a run. Then they started the third quarter on a big push, and they prevented Houston from working their way back into the game. That wasn't the case tonight. Again, the Kings can't string together what they did right last game to this game. They just seem incapable of doing it, incapable of having any kind of consistency. And then in the third quarter, after they got off to a pretty good start in the third quarter and regained the lead and regained momentum, there was almost a 5-minute stretch of Gametime where the Kings didn't score a single point. Again, I know the defense is going to struggle at times, but how is it possible that this roster, with the primary strength of this roster being offense, how is it possible that this roster can go so ice cold like they have in so many times this season, where they can score barely in the teens or in the mid-teens in quarters multiple times, and then have a stretch of 5 freaking minutes where they don't score a single point? They're getting to the foul line and missing free throws, for God's sake. It's the most frustrating part of this Kings team. There's a lot of frustrating things about this Kings team. The most frustrating part for me is the fact that what is supposed to be a strength of this team is so inconsistent that how can this team hope to be consistent in other areas if they can't deliver on the offensive end on a nightly basis? And to make it even worse, right, the defense was really good. I know they gave up 115 points, but the Kings defense tonight was more than good enough for you to win a game. I thought that the Kings had some of their best rotations and communication, period, this game. Like, they were scrambling well, rotating well, communicating well, doing a good job closing out on shooters. The Grizzlies hit 13 threes, but they shot 34% from three-point range. You can 100% live with that. Defensively, you did more than enough to win this basketball game, but you didn't, because your offense let you down. You turned the Memphis Grizzlies over 22 times. And you scored 29 points off of 22 turnovers, and you lost. And then Ja Morant, if I were to tell you at the beginning of the game that Ja Morant would have 8 points, shoot 2 of 13 from the field, and be a minus 32, you would tell me the Kings probably blew the Grizzlies out. Nope. And not only that, Ja Morant was ejected with like 6 minutes and 45 seconds to go in this game. So he wasn't even a presence out there. You know, sometimes even when players are struggling, they can still be enough of a presence out there to where defenses have to respect them and keep an eye on them, so them being out there still has a positive impact on their team. Ja wasn't even out there. The Kings didn't even have to worry about Ja Morant. And still, they fell apart and lost this game down the stretch without Ja there. It's a frustrating loss. Add it to the list for the Sacramento Kings. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Chime. Look, whether you're financially recovering from Black Friday or maybe you're still trying to put pennies together to buy your last-minute Christmas gifts, we've all been there. Spending more during the holidays, it happens, right? It's very, very common, even with a budget. Take control of your finances by using a Chime checking account with features like no monthly or maintenance fees, fee-free overdraft up to $200, or getting paid up to 2 days early with direct deposit. Chime helps with fee-free overdraft up to $200. You can get spotted on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals, no monthly fees or maintenance fees, and there are over 50,000 fee-free ATMs that you can use with Chime. You can set up a direct deposit in your Chime account after a qualifying direct deposit of $200 or more. Chime will notify you to enroll in Spot Me. With an activated debit card, Chime will spot you up to $200 on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals. Your next direct deposit is applied to your negative balance. Chime never charges overdraft fees for using Spot Me. So enjoy the holidays while keeping your financial goals on track with Chime. Open your account in 2 minutes at chime.com/NBA. That's chime.com/NBA. Banking service and debit cards provided by the Bancorp Bank NA or Stride Bank NA. Members FDIC. Spot Me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits do apply. Direct deposit timing depends on submission of payment file. Boosts are available to eligible Chime members enrolled in Spot Me and are subject to monthly limits. Fees apply at out-of-network ATMs and for OTC withdrawals. It's been a theme over De'Aaron Fox's career that, don't piss off De'Aaron Fox, right? When De'Aaron Fox is pissed off, he takes his game to another level, and it's fun and exciting. We saw what the Houston Rockets did, or how the beast that the Houston Rockets awoke from De'Aaron in the last game, right? And it's fun to talk about and fun to kind of joke about, but there comes a point where pissed off De'Aaron Fox is fun, but we have to start questioning why that is what it takes to get the best version out of De'Aaron. Tonight, De'Aaron Fox had 18 points. He was 8 of 23 from the field, a really bad shooting night, 0 of 7 from three-point range, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 6 steals, and 4 turnovers. We'll start with a positive. Regardless of if De'Aaron Fox was pissed off or not, and regardless of if he was having a good scoring night or not, De'Aaron Fox defensively was sensational tonight. And I stand by my belief that De'Aaron Fox is one of the most underrated on-ball defenders in the league, and I do think he's one of the best pure on-ball defenders in the league. He was guarding John Morant from the very beginning tonight, and John Morant had a very, very bad game. De'Aaron Fox, his 6 steals, like he took over this game at times defensively when the Kings were doing things right. We saw the great play defensively that he had against Fred VanVleet when the Kings were turning things around against the Rockets a couple nights ago, right? De'Aaron Fox defensively has been a menace. And when he wants to be, my goodness, he's unstoppable. But there's the statement. When he wants to be. You have Malik Monk in the locker room after the Rockets game going, man, we need someone to piss De'Aaron Fox more because when he's like that, he's incredible. A video resurfaced recently of very young De'Aaron Fox. This might have been his rookie or sophomore season, and Buddy Hield is joking with him saying, man, De'Aaron plays better when he's pissed. Someone's got to piss him off more. You have Mike Brown in practice yesterday looking at the cameras and saying, De'Aaron, I challenge you to find that part of yourself and play that way every single night. So it's fun to talk about. But if you're going to be the star and leader of the Sacramento Kings, which I believe De'Aaron Fox is, how does Fox get to that point more? And it's weird to comment on this from my perspective because I don't understand how easy or difficult it is to play at that level. And I also know that different things impact different players in different ways, right? We know DeMarcus Cousins when he was here in Sacramento. DeMarcus Cousins always played angry, sometimes to his detriment, but it was that anger and that hostility that he played with that made him so dominant during his time here in Sacramento. De'Aaron Fox is not an angry person. He's a great dude, a great guy. But De'Aaron Fox will talk and jaw at you, and he shows his competitive fire kind of through the trash talk and going back and forth. But whether it's the referees get under his skin or the trash talk gets under his skin, we see him flip that proverbial switch and turn into this just unstoppable version of himself. And while that version is so much fun and we know it exists, like, what do the Sacramento Kings have to do? What does De'Aaron Fox have to do to get that version on a nightly basis? Is it even fair to ask that of him or to expect that on a nightly basis? And I can see your comments now. Matt, what do you mean, is it fair? He's paid tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars. Of course it's fair. He's the star. It's what he's supposed to do. It's his job, blah, blah, blah. But I don't know what it takes to get Fox into that mental state. I just know that when he gets there, he produces results. So if you got players and coaches and media and fans all talking about how great De'Aaron Fox is when he's pissed off, but the fact that we can all see that there's a clear difference between normal Fox and pissed off Fox, that means that pissed off Fox isn't showing up enough. Or he's allowing his mood to impact his game, which is fine, except the positive impact is less frequent than it needs to be. So this is not turning into like a bash on Fox segment or like I don't think Fox is trying hard enough for anything like that by any means. But the Kings clearly need more of the pissed off version of De'Aaron Fox. They clearly need it. They do. Like, this Kings team needs that version of Fox on at least a regular basis. Maybe if it can't be nightly, it has to be regular. Because we know De'Aaron can score 30 or 28 or whatever when he's not pissed off and just kind of doing his thing because he's that freaking talented. But man, when he goes to that other zone on both ends of the floor, but especially on offense, it's like there's nothing anybody can do. Just sit back and relax and watch. And for Fox's teammates, it's get the hell out of the way. So I'm concerned. I think it's safe to say concerned that the Kings aren't getting that version of Fox frequently enough. And they need it if they're going to be not just the best version of themselves. They need it if they're going to get back into this Western Conference race. But they also need to just string some freaking performances together, right? They have that great win in Minnesota, followed up with a terrible loss in Portland, and then they lose to the San Antonio Spurs. Well, here you are. You had a great win against Houston. It wasn't nearly as bad of a loss tonight as the Portland loss. I guess it's a matter of perspective because the Kings should have won this game. This game was right there for Sacramento on multiple occasions, and the Kings didn't take it. So maybe that's more frustrating for you than being blown out by Portland. And once again, guess who's up next? The San Antonio Spurs. On the second night of a back-to-back for the Kings, the Spurs are already 2-0 against the Kings. They're probably licking their chops going, okay, let's do it again. Like Sacramento, I mean, it goes without saying, it's basic math and common sense, but the Kings won't be able to get back into this race in the Western Conference if they can't start getting some win streaks together. At the very least, trading a win for a loss and going 500 over the rest of the season ain't going to cut it. Right? And that's not what the Kings are doing. The Kings are trading one win for 2 losses at this point. It's not nearly good enough in the West. Sacramento has to find a way to start winning 3 out of 5 minimum, 4 out of 5 regularly to truly put themselves back in this conversation. And again, it goes back to consistency. The way this team plays on both ends, but especially on the offensive end, consistently, they haven't been good enough to even give me hope that this team will string 4 or 5 wins together. It's just the state of this team right now. And it's disappointing. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The Kings have a lot of problems, but one thing I for sure know isn't a problem, Malik Monk being in the starting lineup. And don't let the 1-2 record in the 3 games that he started fool you. It sure as hell isn't Malik Monk's fault that the Kings are 1-2 over these games. Now, has Malik been perfect? No. Could Malik be better? 100%. Malik was the one that ended up chucking that 3-point Hail Mary to try and tie the game with 4 seconds left. The Kings should have and absolutely could have gotten a better shot than that. So Malik hasn't been perfect by any means. But overall, with Malik in the starting lineup, the Kings are playing noticeably better. Now, what's concerning is, like I talked about a couple episodes ago, I feel like this is the ace up Mike's sleeve with this roster. Starting Malik Monk is the final big move that I think this roster can make. Outside of Devin Carter coming back from his injury and suddenly turning into a superstar. But that feels like luck. That doesn't feel like a card that you have to play. Malik Monk starting was kind of that last move for this roster that made sense. And it's been working, but clearly not working well enough because the Kings are still losing games, even though they're playing noticeably better with Malik Monk out there with the starters. And it's less to do with how the Kings are starting a game and starting the second half and closing the game. And it has more to do with Malik's numbers when he's getting starting caliber minutes, right? Malik has played 7 games this season, including tonight, where he's played 30 or more minutes. Those are starting caliber minutes in my mind. He did not do that last season. He played in the low 20s last season, which made no sense. But here he is getting 30 plus minutes a night in 7 games so far this season. Over those 7 games, Malik Monk is averaging 21.8 points and 6.8 assists per game. Starting caliber numbers from a starting caliber player. And I could argue that when Malik Monk is starting and playing starter caliber minutes, he's one of your most, if not at times, the most consistent player that you have. Because he's attacking the basket, he's getting others involved, he's capable in the pick and roll with Sabonis or whatever big you're playing him out there with. He's been one of your best 3-point shooters. I know statistically he's not towards the top necessarily. He's been in a little bit of a funk as well. But it feels like more often than not, he's one of the guys that's hitting threes for the Sacramento Kings. He's making a positive impact. So I'm sure as hell not going to blame Malik Monk starting and say starting Malik Monk's not working because the Kings are 1-2, because I'm looking at everybody else besides Malik. Not that Malik is blameless, but the Kings have had a problem before Malik was in the starting lineup. Malik's come in, has held up his end of the bargain, and other Kings have not. And I know the Kings got their absolute butts kicked off of the bench tonight, like 60-something from Memphis to like, did the Kings even reach 20 points off the bench? I have no idea. Again, I don't care. I don't care because we know this Kings team is extremely top heavy as it is. Malik Monk coming in off the bench was not going to be the difference in the Kings winning or losing tonight. You know what it would have meant? It would have meant that the starters ultimately scored less points and the bench scored more points, but the Sacramento Kings still lost. And they would have lost by more if Malik wasn't playing the starting minutes of 30 plus a night. That's the reality of the situation with Malik Monk. So I sure as hell don't blame him. I know a lot of you blame Mike Brown, though. And look, I'll be completely honest with you here. I'm feeling like crap. So I'm not trying to like cop out of my job here because this is a conversation that we should have because I read my comment section after every single freaking game. Win or loss. And I see y'all over and over again. Fire Mike Brown. Mike Brown's a bad coach. I could not disagree with you more. And some of y'all are accusing me of thinking like, what has Mike Brown done to you to where you will not criticize him? I criticize Mike all the time. I'll throw out a criticism of Mike Brown right here for you to make you feel better. You ready for this? Keon Ellis should be playing more than 2 freaking minutes. And he sure as hell should be playing more than Jordan McLaughlin. I don't know why Keon Ellis got a DNP last game and 2 minutes tonight. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. I know Keon screwed up and had mistakes in the Oklahoma City Thunder loss. But he's a good basketball player. He absolutely should be an everyday part of this Kings rotation. So there's a criticism of Mike Brown, and I know some of Mike Brown's rotations at times have been very confusing. That being said, Mike Brown is not a bad basketball coach, and it's not Mike Brown's fault that 3 of his best shooters went 1 of 20 from three-point range. It's not Mike Brown's fault that Keegan Murray has fallen off the face of the earth offensively. And no, you can't say, oh, Keegan Murray's shooting is bad because the Kings are asking him to do more on the defensive end and rebounding. Mike Brown is clearly affecting Keegan because Mike is telling him to do more in these areas. Keegan Murray is supposed to be the best two-way player on this team and hopefully one of the best two-way players in the league. So if Mike Brown and the coaching staff are demanding more out of him defensively and demanding more out of him as a rebounder, which he should be at his position, especially considering he's really the only guy at his position on this roster, which is a Monty McNair problem, not a Mike Brown problem. If him being challenged to do that more is having this drastic of effect on his shooting, that's not Mike Brown's fault. That means Keegan Murray isn't as good of a player as the Sacramento Kings thought he was. But if you want to go back and hear me criticize Mike Brown, I did a podcast not too long ago where I was like listing off all the people to blame. And I threw a lot of the blame on Mike Brown. So I'm not just saying everything Mike Brown is doing is great, but some of y'all need to freaking chill out with the fire Mike Brown nonsense because y'all seem to have forgotten what this Kings organization went through with the revolving door of head coaches. And I'll say this perfectly clear to all of you hire Mark Jackson people out there. It's a stupid idea. It would never work. It would be a disaster for the Kings to go out and hire Mark Jackson. It's not happening. All right? It's not going to happen. You don't have to like Mike Brown. But tell me who you're going to go out and get to replace him that you feel would be better. The guy that the Warriors had to get rid of so they could actually win championships, that's the guy you want? Sure. Be my guest. But I'm telling you, realistically, it's not happening. This is a roster issue. This is a consistency issue. Mike certainly wears some of the blame, but there is no more blame on Mike's shoulders than there are on the shoulders of Monty McNair and this front office that has failed to address weaknesses of this team. And I love Monty too. I like the moves Monty made. I think Monty is a good general manager. I think the Kings have something here, but they have clear weaknesses. They haven't addressed it. And even though it's only December, it's not going to be long before it's only January and then, oh God, it's February and now we're at the All-Star break and the Sacramento Kings might be in too far of a hole to climb out of. So we can talk about this more, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% right about everything and 100% right about Mike Brown, but I think some of the stuff I see from y'all about firing Mike Brown is crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. So there. I guess I got that off my chest. Now I'm going to go chug some NyQuil, finish up my shift at ABC 10 here, and go to bed and wake up tomorrow. And hopefully I'll be feeling better, and the Sacramento Kings will be playing better against the San Antonio Spurs. No matter what, I'll have a post-game podcast for you, or at least I should, unless I'm on my deathbed. I appreciate your support, whether you agree with me or not about Mike Brown or agree with me or not about anything. I appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.